Hello, hello, hello. It is Wednesday, and I'm doing the second day in a week this week. So, yes, it is day 37 today. Had to think about that for a bit. Yeah, day 37, and I've only got 3 chapters in Leviticus to read today, but it starts off with a ritual after childbirth and then goes on to lots and lots and lots of laws and rules about leprosy. Yay. And interesting fact, leprosy is still going around today, like this century, this decade, this year. It's hovering around, it's been a while since I looked at it. It's hovering around either 5 million deaths from leprosy a year, because we have a cure for it. It's just in places that don't have the easy access that to healthcare that we do in I'd say modern society. Because it's all around. Well, there's different places in the world where it still is happening, and I'm just thinking, why haven't we eradicated it? Because we've eradicated smallpox, as far as I know. I probably should look that up. We've eradicated lots of other diseases and things. We're still going for the lingering effects of COVID, though. It's kind of joined the flus and colds that we have going around at the moment, with varying effects for people. Some people, it's just like another cold. For some people, it's like they're just not able to do anything because it just saps them of all energy. It's like Legionnaire's disease does to people, or MS or ME. So, if you watch this and if you're already a Christian, then pray for the people that are suffering from these diseases that leave them just bedbound. Pray for healing for them, and yeah. Right. That's a nice start to the video. Okay. Leviticus chapter 12. Ritual after childbirth. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a woman has conceived and born a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As in the days of her customary impurity, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Then she shall then continue on the blood of her purification 33 days. Oh. She shall not touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification are fulfilled. That's a long time. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks. What? As in as in her customary impurity, and she shall continue in the blood of her purification 66 days. Why? When the days of her purification are fulfilled, whether for a son or daughter, she shall bring to the priest a lamb for the first year as a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her. And she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who is born a male or a female. And if she is not able to bring a lamb, then she may bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one as a burnt offering and the other as a sin offering. So the priest shall make atonement for her, and she will be clean. Ugh. The law concerning leprosy. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it becomes the skin of his body like a leprous sore, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priests. The priest shall examine the sore on the skin of the body, and if the hair of the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous sore. Ugh. Then the priest shall examine him and pronounce him unclean. If the bright spot is white on the skin of his body, but does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and its hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if indeed the sore appears to be as it was, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. Then the priest shall examine him again on the 7th day, and indeed if the sore has faded and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab should spread all over the skin, after it has been seen by the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again. And if the priest sees that the scab has indeed spread on the skin, then the priest shall announce him unclean. It is leprosy. Oh no. When the leprous sore is on a person, then he shall be brought to the priest. And the priest shall examine him, and if the swelling on the skin is white, has turned the hair white, and there is a spot of raw flesh in the swelling, it is an old leprosy on the skin of his body. The priest shall announce him unclean, and he shall not isolate him, for he is unclean. If the leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has the sore, from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider, and indeed if the leprosy has covered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. It has all turned white. He is clean. What? That doesn't make sense. But when raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean. And the priest shall examine the raw flesh, and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean. It is leprosy. Or if the raw flesh changes and turns white again, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the sore has turned white, and then the priest shall announce him clean who has the sore. That still doesn't make sense. If the body develops a boil in the skin and it is healed, and in the place of the boil there comes a white swelling, or a bright spot, reddish white, then it shall be shown to the priest, and if when the priest sees it, it indeed appears deeper than the skin, and the hair has turned white, the priest shall announce him unclean. It is a leprous sore, and has broken out of the boil. I probably should read this again, but I don't really want to. But if the priest examines him, and indeed there is no white hairs on it, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days. And if it should at all spread out all over the skin, then the priest shall announce him unclean. It is the leprous sore. If the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. If the body receives a burn on its skin by fire, and the raw flesh of the burn becomes a bright spot, reddish white or white, then the priest shall examine it, and if the hair of the bright spot is turned white, and it appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy broken out on the burn. Therefore the priest shall announce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. But if the priest examines it, and indeed there are no white hairs in the bright spot, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days. And the priest shall examine him on the 7th day, and if it has spread all over the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. If the bright spot stays in one space and has not spread over the skin, but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn. The priest shall announce him clean. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or beard, then the priest shall examine the sore, and indeed if it appears deeper than the skin, and there is a thin white hair, then the priest shall announce him unclean, leprosy on the head or beard. If the priest examines the scaly sore, and indeed it does not appear deeper than the skin, and there is no black hair in it. I thought it said white hair. Then the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine the sore. If indeed the scale has not spread, and there is no yellow hair in it, the scale does not appear deeper than the skin, he shall shave himself, but the scale he shall not shave. And the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale another 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine the scale, and indeed if the scale has not spread over the skin, and does not appear deeper than the skin, they pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. If the scale should spread all over the body after his cleansing, then the priest shall examine him, and indeed if the scale has spread over the skin, the priest shall not seek for yellow hair, he is unclean. But if the scale appears to be at a standstill, and there is black hair grown up on it, the scale has healed, he is clean, and the priest shall announce him clean. If a man or woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, specifically white bright spots, then the priest shall look, and indeed if the bright spots on the skin of the body are dull, it is a white spot that grows on the skin, he is clean. As for the man whose hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. He whose hair has fallen from his forehead, he is bald on the forehead, but he is clean. And if there is no bald head or bald forehead on a reddish white sore, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. If the priest shall examine it, and indeed if the swelling of the sore is reddish white on his bald head, or as the appearance of leprosy on the skin of the body, he is a leprous man, he is unclean. The priest shall surely pronounce him unclean. His sore is on his head. Now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn and his head bare. He shall cover his moustache and cry, unclean, unclean. He shall be unclean all the days he has the sore, he shall be unclean, he is unclean. And he shall dwell alone, and his dwelling shall be outside the camp. Oh, lots of conditions there. Some bits I didn't understand. It's a bit about covering all his body. That bit doesn't make sense to me. Earlier on in this chapter. Right. The law concerning leprous garments. Also, if a garment has the leprous plague on it, whether it is a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it is in the warp or wool, for linen or wool, whether in a leather or in anything made of leather, and if the plague is greenish or reddish in the garment or in the leather, whether in the warp or the woof or the anything made of leather, it is a leprous plague and shall be shown to the priest. The priest shall examine the plague and isolate that which is the plague 7 days. And he shall examine the plague on the 7th day, and if the plague is spread in the garment, either in the warp or the woof, in the leather or in anything made of leather, the plague is an active leprosy, it is unclean. He shall therefore burn the garment in which is the plague. For it is an active leprosy, the garment shall be burnt in the fire. But if the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the garment, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing in which is the plague, and he shall isolate it another 7 days. Who's going to clean it? Then the priest shall examine the plague after it has been washed, and indeed if the plague has not changed its colour, though the plague has not spread, it is unclean, and you shall burn it in the fire. It continues eating away, whether the damage is outside or inside. If the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has faded or after washing, then he shall tear it out of the garment, whether it is out of the... If it appears again in the garment, whether in the... It is a spreading plague. You shall burn it with the fire, which is of the plague. And if you wash the garment, and if the plague has disappeared from it, then it shall be washed a 2nd time and shall be clean. This is the law of the leprous plague in a garment, or to pronounce it clean or pronounce it unclean. Chapter 14. Ritual for cleansing healed lepers. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This shall be the Lord of the leper for the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out of the camp, and the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the leprosy is healed in the leper, then the priest shall command him to take for him who is to be cleansed 2 living and clean birds, cedar wood, and scarlet and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. As for the living bird, he shall take it to the cedar wood and the scarlet and the hyssop, dip them in the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water, and he shall sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed from leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean, and he shall let the living bird loose in the open field. He who is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off his hair, and wash himself in the water, that he may be clean. After that he shall come into the camp, and shall stay outside his tent 7 days. But on the 7th day he shall shave all the hair off his head and beard and his eyebrows. All his hair he shall shave off. What about his body as well? He shall wash his clothes and wash his body in the water, and he shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, one ewe lamb of the 1st year without blemish, 3/10 of an ephah of the fine flour mixed with oils as a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. Then the priest who makes him clean shall present the man who is to be made clean, and those things before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And the priest shall take 1 male lamb and offer it as a trespass offering, and the log of oil, and wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb in the place where he kills the sin offering and the burnt offering in a holy place. For as the sin offering is the priest, so is the trespass offering. It is most holy. If the priest shall take some of The priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. Then the priest shall dip his right finger in the oil and shall sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. And the rest of the oil in his hand the priest shall put some on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and the big toe of his right foot. And the blood on the blood of the trespass offering. The rest of the oil, that is the priest's in the priest's hands, he shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. Then the priest shall offer the sin offering and make atonement for him who is to be cleansed from his uncleanliness. Afterward he shall kill the burnt offering, and the priest shall offer the burnt offering with the grain offering on the altar, and the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be clean. But if he is poor and cannot afford it, then he shall take 1 male lamb as a trespass offering to be waived, to make atonement for him, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with oil as a grain offering, a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, such as he is able to afford. One shall be a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering. He shall bring them to the priest on the 8th day for his cleansing, to the door of the tabernacle of meeting before the Lord. And the priest shall take the lamb of the trespass offering and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. He shall kill the lamb as a trespass offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood on the ear, thumb, and big toe on his right, and the priest shall pour some of the oil into the lamb, into the palm of his own left hand. And the priest shall sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil in his left hand 7 times before the Lord, and the oil in his ear, thumb, and big toe on his right. The rest of the oil is in the priest's hand. He shall put on the head of him who is to be cleansed, and to make atonement for him before the Lord. And he shall offer 1 of the turtle doves or young pigeons as he can afford, such as he is able to afford, 1 as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering, with the grain offering. So the priest shall make atonement for him who is to be cleansed before the Lord. That is the law for one who is a leprous or who cannot afford the usual cleansing. Oh my word. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, When you have come into the land of Canaan, which I give you as possession, I put the leprous plague in a house in the land of your possession. And he who owns that house comes and tells the priest, saying, It seems to me that there is some plague in the house. It seems to be there is some plague in the house. Then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest goes into it to examine the plague. Why examine the plague in the house? That is all that is in the house may not be made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to examine the house, and he shall examine the plague, and indeed, if the plague is on the walls of the house with ingrayed streaks, greenish or reddish, it actually shows up in the houses, wow, which appear deep on the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house and shut up the house 7 days. Sounds a bit like mould, really. And the priest shall come again on the 7th day and look, and indeed if the plague has spread on the walls of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stones which is the plague, and they cast them into an unclean place outside the city. And he shall cause the house to be scraped inside, all around. All the dust that they scrape off they shall pour out in an unclean place outside the city. And they shall take some of the other stones and put them in the place of those stones, And he shall take other mortar and plaster of the house. Now, if the plague comes back and breaks out in the house after he has taken away the stones, after he has scraped the house and after it is plastered, then the priest shall come and look, and indeed if the plague has spread in the house again, and is an active leprosy, then the house is unclean. He shall break down the house, its stones, its timbers, and its plaster of the house, and he shall carry them outside the city to an unclean place. I hope they're going to be cleansing themselves to take the stuff out of the city as well. Moreover, he who goes into the house all the while it is shut up shall be unclean until evening. And he who lies down in the house shall wash his clothes, and he who eats in the house shall wash his clothes. But if the priest comes in and examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the house after the house was plastered, then the priest shall announce the house clean, because the plague has healed. And he shall take to cleanse the house 2 birds of cedar wood, scarlet and hyssop, and one of the birds in an earthen vessel he shall kill. Take the cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet, and the living bird, dip them in the blood of the slain, and sprinkle the house 7 times, and he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird in the running water. And the living bird with the cedar wood and the hyssop and the scarlet, then he shall let the living bird loose outside the city in the open field, and make atonement for the house. It is safe and clean. This is the law for any leprous sore or scale, for the leprous garment or a house, for a swelling and a scab and a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy. Oh, that took a long time. And I'm glad I'm actually reading it out loud, because if I was reading it without speaking at the same time, then I would have fallen asleep after the first paragraph. Yeah, I struggle to read in terms of like staying awake while reading. So I have to either mumble it or say it out loud. Yay. I don't know why my brain does that. It just does. But this has been a really long video, which I might have to do in a couple of parts. I'll see about that after I stop this. I'll see you in the next video.